in a real estate deal or in any investment, frankly, it's never a binary of whether or not there is or is not risk. It's to what extent of risk is there. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. What is going on, everyone? Happy Saturday. Hope everyone is having a crushing weekend. I wanted to make this podcast because someone in my network reached out to me this week, and that individual lent money on a real estate deal to an investor, actually on a couple deals, well over $100,000. And it appears that money could be all gone. Bye-bye. And that really makes me sad. Ironically enough, I actually lent to the same borrower about 2.5 years ago on a real estate deal, and I got my money back. But I learned that when I got it back, there were a bunch of things that didn't happen in that process that should have. And I truly believe that, at least at the time of when I lent the money, the lender was in good faith. And regardless of the lender, it is possible for people to lose money in this industry. And it is very upsetting when it happens, because obviously when someone lends money, there's no intent to lose that money. And as long as the individual that is borrowing the money isn't an evil person or isn't the devil, then the intent is not to lose the money either. But sometimes it still happens. And so I'm making this podcast because if you have ever been interested in lending money on a real estate deal, or you are actively lending, this episode I'm making for you. And so if you're not, that's fine. Feel free to listen for entertainment. It could get pretty dense. But I wanted to make this because over the past 3.5, 4 years, I've learned a lot about the lending process and how lending money on a real estate deal can be done correctly, and how it can be done incorrectly, and to what scale the money, to what level of risk there is in an investment. And I think that's most important in a real estate deal or in any investment, frankly. It's never a binary of whether or not there is or is not risk. It's to what extent of risk is there. And everything I'm about to go through are ways and are simple steps that you can take in order to decrease the level of risk so that if you're investing in a real estate deal, that risk is minimized. And let me clarify, like, real estate can be an excellent investment. Most private money lenders make well above S&P 500 averages, and their money is backed by real estate. That said, if the operator doesn't know what they're doing, and not necessarily with bad intent, but even if it's just innocent ignorance, then there's some inherent risk. And so that is the purpose of this podcast. And before I get into some simple steps, I want to, full disclosure, I am not an attorney. Don't listen to anything I say. Everything I say is wrong. And there is nothing that I am claiming to have any legal knowledge of. I am simply sharing experiences that have worked for me. And so just know, like, at the end of the day, go talk to an attorney. So here are those steps. And I'm going to transition into step one. And it's a good segue because my step one is use an attorney to draft your documents first and foremost. And so if you are considering investing in a real estate deal, and you don't have experience with that, it could be possible that a borrower brings to you, hey, I have some docs. I think it's fine to look at them, even if you want to take them, but either just go to an attorney in the state of the property that you're considering investing in and have them either look at the docs or just have them write up your own documents. And if you're lending regularly, or if you intend to lend regularly, then you can hire an attorney in the state that the majority of your investments are going to be in, and just have them do some like sample docs, and you could reuse them over and over and over. Be sure the attorney is in the state that the property is in, just because there's different state regulations across borders. And If you're just getting started and you're not at that step yet, you're not lending regularly, then you could ask a title company you could ask the title company who's doing the transaction if the property is under contract, which if I were you, you want to have a serious lending discussion once the borrower has a property under contract. Then that means the title process has started, and you can ask the borrower, hey, who's the title company? You can ask the title company. Every title company has to work with an attorney because in the transfer of real estate, the seller has to sign a deed, and an attorney is the only person that can draft said deed. And so every title company always works with an attorney. You can ask the title company who that attorney is and if they would be willing to talk with you about drafting your documents, and just have a conversation with them and see if they would be willing to do it. I see so many lenders not take this step because, number one, the process of reaching out to an attorney is kind of painful. You don't know them. You got to figure out who to talk to. You don't know what they tell you is, you don't know how good the attorney is or how credible. But just like anything else, and especially if you're putting significant money at risk, it is going to be well worth a couple hundred, a few hundred, even if it's $500 for an attorney to get your docs straight, to make sure, at least, especially in the beginning when you're learning, that your documents are good and everything is going to be recorded properly. And we'll get to that in a minute. So that is number one. Use an attorney. It's worth it. You're going to have a million justifiable reasons of why you think you could just not use an attorney. I'm telling you, it's just not worth the headache. Just pay the attorney, have them draft your documents, and typically you are going to be more secured. Or, in the event that the borrower is having his attorney or her attorney draft the documents, that can be helpful as well. The second thing, the documents that you need. And so you're going to need either a deed of trust or a mortgage, depending on which state you're in, and a promissory note. The deed of trust or the mortgage is going to get recorded at the corresponding county. And the promissory note is is the borrower's promise to pay you back and outlines all the terms. So think of it like the deed of trust or the mortgage is like the whole package, the whole piece of the puzzle of your investment, and the promissory note is like a sub piece of that puzzle that is going to be with that deed of trust and mortgage. It's going to outline the details of what your arrangement with them. A deed of trust and a mortgage mean different things because it depends on whether or not the state is a title theory state or a lien theory state or an intermediate theory state. I'm not going to get into what those are because, again, that's more up the attorney alley. Ask your attorney which state that you're in and what it means to you as someone that's lending, because they mean different things. A deed of trust, there is a third party called a trustee who holds the title of the property when the property is bought, and then that title is released to you once your loan is paid off. If you're in a lien theory state and you get a mortgage, then there's no third party. And in both cases, in all three cases, you can still foreclose. They just mean different things. I'm not going to get into the details of what each mean. But as someone who's going to be lending substantial money, it is probably a good idea that you understand the difference between those three, which state you're in, and what that means for you as a lender if things go south. The third thing I would suggest, communicate with the title company. Send them your documents directly so that you have control over the flow of the paperwork. And look, this isn't about like a lack of trust in your borrower, but I've seen way too many cases where people are lending money to newbies, and this happened to me. So when I lent on my first deal, and I gave the real estate investor money, I got my money back, but I found out when we went to sell the property that my lien or my mortgage, and this was actually an intermediate theory state, it was never recorded. And so technically my investment was never backed by the piece of real estate, and I got my money back. but like I just wasn't aware. And if I was in contact directly with the title company, I could have validated and confirmed that the documents were recorded at purchase, and that's the benefit. And so if you are lending on a deal and you're working with a title company, if you're working with the attorney who works with the title company regularly, then the attorney will probably just communicate to the title company, and then that can happen for you. If you're working with another attorney who does not regularly work with that title company, then that attorney can communicate to the title company on your behalf, and then the attorney can validate that your investment got recorded. And you can communicate directly with that title company in the event, let's say you get an attorney to write sample docs and you just fill them out and you're not using an attorney for this transaction. You can communicate directly with the title company to ensure that your documents are, one, appropriate for the state that you're in, and two, they got recorded at closing. So, if a borrower is just getting started, or even if a borrower is relatively experienced and has some flips under their belt, they may not be aware of all of the details of how this process works. And if you're the one that's lending money, you should be aware of exactly how the process works. And it would be in your best interest to be in touch and communicate directly with the title company so you can confirm that the lien was recorded. Number 4, send the company a loan commitment document. I learned this when I first started hiring attorneys. And a loan commitment document is just a basic document from the lender to the borrower that has your name, your date, your address, and it basically says, "Dear borrower, I'm lending you, this amount of money for this specific property, and here's all of our terms." And it has the amount, the term, the points, the interest rate. Is there a prepayment penalty? Is there a monthly payment schedule? Is there a personal guarantee, etc.? And it's a really good document because, number one, if you have a template, you can make sure that template, like there's no information that's left out in any individual one of your deals. But then you have an official like loan commitment document that is on paper. It goes to the title company or to the attorney, and it says, "Hey, here are the terms of our arrangement." It's in writing, and you don't have, whatever agreement via text message or some sort of verbal agreement between you and your borrower. You have a third-party document that's like an intro document to the transaction, and it says, "Hey, here is what I'm committing to loan. Here you go, title company," etc. But I found that document to be helpful even as a borrower, just because it puts everything in writing. Everything is super clear. There's no questions about what the terms were. And that document is going to help make sure as a borrower that when it comes time for the lender to send the money, that it's very, very clear up front at the get-go, and there's not going to be any miscommunication or misunderstanding. And the worst thing can happen as a borrower is something happens, there's a misunderstanding, and then that money doesn't show up when it's time to close, and then you're put in a really tough spot. So I have found that title commitment document to be super, super helpful. Number 5, ask for the title company to confirm after closing that the mortgage and the deed of trust was recorded. And so your mortgage and your deed of trust, the borrower is going to have to sign those documents with the closing documents. And then that mortgage or deed of trust will be delivered to the title company at the time of closing. And those are documents that need to be recorded with the corresponding clerk of courts. And the title company can most title companies do what's called an e-record, where they record online. Every county is a little bit different, but that is fairly standard in my experience. And the title company can confirm for you that mortgage and the deed of trust was recorded and everything is good to go. And if it's done correctly, you're going to get a copy in the mail from the title company. If you don't get something in the mail, it's very likely that your deal was never recorded. And so you can either have your attorney follow up or you can follow up directly with the title company. But a good step just to make sure in the beginning at closing that you're protected. Number 6, the option to get a personal guarantee. And As a borrower, like I borrow a lot more than I lend. This is less ideal for me as a borrower, but as a lender, you are more protected if you get a personal guarantee, as long as the person that you're lending to has a net worth that, you know, has your loan amount backed. And we'll get into that in a second. That's more on the borrower. But on the topic of a personal guarantee, if you're in second position and the first and the second position loan amounts together is greater than 20 to 30% of what the property is going to sell for after it's all done, then the second position's money can be at risk for a period of time if something were to go south. And if you don't have a very, very good personal relationship with the borrower, and let's say you don't trust the person with your spouse, late at night with some drinks, then it may be wise to get a personal guarantee. And again, of course, that's only as good as their net worth. And so there could be some side discussions about what that all might look like, because you can get a personal guarantee all you want, but if the person's not worth anything, then that personal guarantee is not worth much. But the personal guarantee backs you, because if the deal were to go south, then and that borrower bought the property in an LLC, they cannot simply close their LLC and then your money is poof gone. They have backed your investment with their personal assets, meaning if they own a house, the money that's in their bank, if they have a retirement account, you can go after their personal assets because they have personally guaranteed their assets. And I don't think, for the record, I don't personally believe that this is necessary in all transactions. I have borrowed, actually every single deal that I've borrowed in second position, I have not, the lenders have opted not to get a personal guarantee. And I think that, may have to do with my experience and the fact that I've never lost any lender's money, and et cetera, et cetera. But as a lender, I think it's simply important that as an option that, especially if you're in second position, because if you're in first position, meaning you have the most amount of money that's being lent in the transaction, and as long as, one amount of money is not recorded with the corresponding county before another, if both loans are going to be recorded at the same time, in most cases, it's the loan amount that is the most amount of money that's going to be in first position. Well, that first position is typically going to be entirely backed by the piece of real estate at the time that it's purchased, and some of your investment as a second position will be backed, but in a lot of cases, all of it may not be backed until there's some forced equity. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And so to further secure your money in second position, if you ask for a personal guarantee, then your investment is backed not only by the asset, but is backed by that individual's personal assets. There's a lot of investors out there that may tell you to go fly a kite if you ask for a personal guarantee. And, that's part of the risk of the game. But if you have a personal guarantee, then your investment is a little bit more secure. Number 7 is the numbers on a deal. So we're kind of transitioning out of the, paperwork side of things, and getting into the numbers on a deal. And we won't get too granular here, but I want to keep it high level enough and get a small amount of granular so that you can understand the basics in the important pieces of the numbers on a deal. And so first, if you're not trained to run numbers yourself on a deal and to know how to tell what a property is going to be worth, how much a property is worth right now, then you could always consider getting a third party's opinion on the numbers on a deal. Very easy ways to do this. You could go look up the property. You could go look up the zip code. pull on Zillow an agent that's done a ton of volume in the zip code and just get their opinion. Most agents are going to be more than happy to do that for you. Typically, everyone and their mother has a friend that's a real estate agent. There's a lot of different options on how you could get a third party's opinion on them. Obviously, if you're working with a very, very experienced borrower and they flipped a whole bunch of houses, then maybe the risk is to a lesser extent. But the less experience that a borrower has, and the further removed from real estate that you are, the more the benefit it may be for you just to vet your numbers. Now, really, really good real estate investors are going to send you like a written document that shows the comps and all that stuff. But unless you're trained how to tell if the comparable properties are right, if the numbers are right, it might be difficult for you to tell how good of a deal that it is. And so, not always a bad idea to consider getting a third party's opinion on those numbers if you are not trained how to do it yourself. The second part of the numbers on a deal. If the first and the second position loan is more than 70% of what the property is going to sell for once it's all fixed up, then there could be some inherent risk that's there. And that is especially if the borrower is getting all of the second position money at closing, right? And I'll get into that in a second. But if they're getting all the second position money at closing, they're likely getting a check at closing to cover their holding costs, which is very, very normal, and it's fine in the industry. It's just good for you to know the level of risk as a lender of when that happens. But that borrower at the moment of close and at the moment of purchase is typically going to be leveraged a little bit more than what the property is worth. And so if something were to happen immediately, there is just some more inherent risk there. And until there is forced appreciation on the property, meaning the property goes through the rehab process and it becomes worth more and more, then there is going to be some existing inherent risk. And really, this is why, if you know anything about real estate investing, this is why hard money lenders do draws for stuff like rehab, and they don't just give borrowers all of the money up front, because the hard money lenders' risk is a lot less if they only give some of the money up front and they only give rehab as rehab is completed. And that's why hard money lenders do that. If they gave all the money up front, there would be significantly more risk, because the ratio of what they're lending to what the property is currently worth in its current condition is getting closer and closer to 1-to-1, which means if something were to go south, there's a less and less chance that hard money lender is going to get their money back. And so it's good for you to know, as a second position lender, what's the total loan amount of the hard money lender, what's your total loan amount, and then run the math on how much are your two loans adding up to together, and what percent of what the property is going to be worth once it's done is that total loan amount. And just kind of understanding the math on that, I think, can be very helpful. So I want to go through a quick example here. Let's say that your borrower is buying a house for $120,000 and their first position lender is lending $100,000, and you are lending $60,000 to pay for the $20,000 gap in the purchase price plus $40,000 in rehab. That means that there's a total of $160,000 of debt on a $120,000 purchase. And if that deal isn't instantly worth $160,000, then there's going to be a delta, and the risk is greater the less the house is worth, right? And then your risk is also going to be increased as well, the less skilled your operator is. And so, and something to keep in mind as well, just because let's say that someone is buying that $120,000 house, they close on it, and it is instantly worth $160,000, that doesn't necessarily mean that, your whole investment is covered, because if it's worth $160,000, that means to get $160,000, they have to put it on the open market and sell it. And there's going to be selling costs, typically anywhere between 8 to 10%, 10% conservatively. And so that means that house that's worth 160,000, in order to liquidate that 160,000, they're probably only going to net, maybe what is that? 144,000, in which case more of your money is going to be at risk. Let's go through another example. Same numbers, but this is going to be a little bit more of a traditional setup with a hard money lender and a second position private money lender, or a gap funder, as they're very commonly called. Let's say you're purchasing the property for $120,000, and the hard money lender is funding $100,000 of the purchase, and they're funding all $40,000 of the renovation, and they're going to do that in draws, meaning at purchase, they're not giving that entire $140,000 loan all at once. They're going to bring $100,000 to purchase, and then as the renovation starts to get done, they're going to release that $40,000 throughout that process. And the borrower wants to borrow $30,000 from you to cover the gap of $20,000 in the purchase price, and then cover, let's say, $10,000 of holding costs throughout the project. So then the dynamic of that investment changes a little bit. The total debt at purchase is $130,000 versus the previous example was $160,000, and the borrower paid $120,000 for the house. And so the delta is much less, and given that in real estate, as investors, as flippers, it's important for us to buy good deals. In other words, we buy property typically, as long as the investor is good and it's a good operator, they're buying homes that are worth more than what they paid for them. And so if a borrower paid $120,000 and you only have $130,000 of debt, that means if that house is instantly worth $160,000 or even $150,000, and for some reason that house needs to be liquidated, even with selling costs, your investment is going to be protected by the asset in that case. Because that hard money lender only has $100,000 of debt, and then they're going to have your $130,000 on top. So really important, I think, to understand just the dynamics of the numbers. And when you're lending, if you have a really good borrower and a really good operator, you probably don't need to worry about any of this. But especially if you're lending to maybe a newer operator, and I would define a newer operator, someone that's done less than 10 flips in the past couple of years. And I picked 10 kind of arbitrary, but there's a lot of different things that can happen flipping. And unless you have, 5 to 10 flips under your belt, there's a lot of different things that can happen on each individual project. And which means the less exposed to more things that an operator is, just the more inherent risk that there is. And after 10 houses, unless there's a style of renovation that hasn't been done and they're trying to take on a new style of renovation. For example, if someone has just done 10 renovations where they've changed out kitchen, flooring, bathrooms, paint, roof, etc., and they're trying to get you to lend on a deal where they're doing a full gut and they're going to do an addition and all this stuff, then there's going to be more inherent risks there. So just understanding the dynamics of the deal and then understanding the numbers, if you so choose. I think it's simply good for you to understand how to run the numbers and how to understand what your risk is. And so add up the money of what the hard money lender is bringing, add up your investment, understand how much debt is going to be on the property, and compare that to what the property is going to be worth in its current condition, just to see how immediately leveraged that you are. And so I think that's an important topic that can be frequently overlooked, because the better the deal, the less leverage you're going to be and the more protected you're going to be inherently. And then the last section here, number 8, is your borrower, right? And so we've covered kind of the paperwork and the legal side. We've covered the numbers on a deal. The last puzzle piece here is going to be your borrower. And like I mentioned, if that borrower doesn't have 10 flips or so in the past couple of years, then your money is just at a higher level of risk. And that's not to say to lending to newer flippers is bad. It's just simply important for you to understand the level of risk that you're taking on. And, ideally as a lender, you can charge for that risk, right? The riskier of an investment, the more of a return that you want to make, and the more clear you want to understand the return of your capital. But I've seen way too many people, and these are very, very well-intended people, lose money just because they don't know, or there's some ignorance in the process of lending. They get kicked really hard in the teeth, and they don't have enough money to go to the dentist, right? And again, it's fine to invest with newbies, but my suggestion would be, if you're investing with someone that's new, do a small deal first, and know that means you have the understanding that means you might miss out on potential bigger returns, but that's the rules of the game. If you're doing a deal with a newbie, like if it's your first time doing a deal with someone, know that it's just going to be a smaller deal and see how they do, right? That your risk is less inherent the less that you're investing, and make someone prove themselves to you. That's just the cost of the game. And I've said this already, but your return of your capital is more important than the return on your capital. And if you don't have a personal guarantee and you invest with someone who gets kicked in the teeth, there's a chance that they can't pay you back if things go south. Because again, if they bought the property in an LLC and things go south, they can just close their business, and the money that you lent the LLC, it's poof, gone. And then it's going to be up to that borrower on how they want to handle that situation, right? And if that borrower is a well-intended person but doesn't have the ability to give the money back, and doesn't really want to work through the process of developing a plan to give the money back, then it is going to be difficult to get it back. And from experience, the legal process sucks. Like, stay away from it at all costs. If you have to do it, then you do what you got to do. But in my experience, the cost of legal fees and all that stuff, compared to the money that you may get, compared to the money that you are actually going to get in the end of the process, they're all wildly different than you foresee. And it's just, it's not a process that is conducive for anyone. And really, the only scenario in which you lend money to an LLC and they can't close it, and you have a right to get your money back, is if there's some sort of fraud involved. And that is very difficult to prove, right? Fraud means that the person intentionally caused harm, and you have to have proof that there was intentional harm, right? It can't just be that they didn't know what they were doing. It can't just be that there was ignorance there. It can't just be that they were a terrible operator. Like, there needs to be clear proof somewhere of intentional harm, intentional fraud. Otherwise, it's going to be useless to go after that. And so, from a borrower standpoint, always better if you invest with people. Let me rephrase that. Maybe not always better, but there is less inherent risk if you invest with people who are skilled at this process and who are also skilled at making money in general and have higher net worths. And they're naturally good humans. Your investment is going to be safer. And so that is it. That is what I got. I want to summarize this up into three simple things. And so I want to recap the last however minutes, 30 minutes or so, into three simple things that you can make sure that you do if you're lending money on a real estate deal to make sure that your money is protected. One, do the legal stuff correctly and do it right. Hire an attorney, do the paperwork the right way, have an attorney handle it. Two is the deal. Audit the numbers, understand the debt ratio to what the property is worth, have a third party audit it if you need, but understand how good the deal is. The third thing is the borrower. And I'm going to bucket the borrower down into three things. If the borrower is a good human, the borrower has skill and experience flipping and investing in real estate, and the borrower is highly skilled at making money and has a higher net worth, if all three of those boxes are checked, you are going to have less inherent risk. The more of those boxes that go unchecked, the more inherent risk that you will have. And so, between those three things, There's the checkbox of using an attorney, having the paperwork right. There's the checkbox of the deal being very good. And then there's 3 checkboxes on the borrower, right? So a total of five boxes that you want to check on every deal that you do. If all 5 are checked, there is going to be less inherent risk. The less of those 5 boxes that are checked, your risk is simply going to increase, and may not mean that you shouldn't do the deal, but it's just good for you to understand what your risk is and the downside as well. So I hope you guys got some value out of that. I wanted to simply put that out there because I've just seen way too many people lose money. And I have lost money on deals myself, but I have never not paid any of my lenders back. And I think it's important that if you're lending money, that you make sure that you are going to get your money back. Because it's important not just to get your money back, but we want to invest in real estate and get rich and make a whole bunch of money together. So hope you guys got some value out of that. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. And until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.